Okay, and greetings to everyone, and thank you for joining this forum. First, I want to thank AMIC, especially Prof. Ramon Tuazon, for asking me to join this panel. I'm truly pleased and honored to be a part of the 50th anniversary of this organization, with which I have been closely associated for 3 decades.
Recording stopped.
In a sense, AMIC,
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
AMIC had been my second office after the Institute of Policy Studies, where I have been working for the past 30 years. I grew up with AMIC, learning so much and meeting so many thought leaders. AMIC provided me an education like no other institution, so I'm very grateful to be here. This conference is occurring at a time unlike any other in my own lifetime. By the way, I was not privy to the keynote addresses, but I discovered that all of us are focusing on pretty much the same point with slightly dissimilar perspectives. Since World War II, there has never been a peacetime crisis of these proportions. Though pandemics are not new, the spread and impact of COVID-19 have been unprecedented. It has affected the world, the whole world, in countless ways. Since our domain is communications, I would like to draw attention to the communication dimension of this crisis. I don't think I would be far off the mark if I said there is no crisis since World War II that has produced so much information on any one subject across the globe. But unfortunately, it is not just information, but misinformation and disinformation as well. This is a crisis that has been crying out for factual, reliable, and helpful information in every part of the world. Did we get it? Media outlets in every country have an undeniable and inevitable role to play in coping with this crisis. But did they measure up to this awesome responsibility? Media's role was especially needed by the ordinary public to sort out the wheat from the chaff, to distill the essence from an avalanche of complex information, to call out the misinformation or disinformation that was widely disseminated. Did our media do all that? Those are some of the questions we need to ask ourselves as denizens of the media world. This crisis may go, but others will surely follow. And if we do not prove our worth, then we will deserve the contempt that will follow. This is not a challenge just for AMIC alone, but the whole of the media world. And I might add, this is not just science journalism. This is journalism, period. Now I would like to touch on a challenge that is specific to AMIC and the Asian media world. One of the most intriguing ideas I came to learn about when I entered AMIC was the idea of Asian communications theory and practice. One of the earliest intellectual leaders of AMIC, Dr. Anurag Gunasekara, spoke and wrote about this issue. He was joined by many others in AMIC. I came to AMIC not as an academic scholar, but as a media practitioner immersed in Western, especially American and British ideas about public communication practice, if not theory. So I was greatly excited about this new dimension to communication theory and practice. As an Asian, I was thrilled to see the emergence of an Asian voice. However, after many years with AMIC and the Asian media, I have to say that this idea still remains work in progress with not enough progress, in my humble opinion. By the way, the fact that we are republishing the communication theory, Asian perspective, without much further additions says something. Some may wonder why I am bringing up the Asian voice at this time, when practically all mass communications these days, thanks to new technology, are instantly and always global. Internet, Facebook, and Instagram, to name a few, are inherently global and non-denominational. While that is partly true, it is not entirely true. National and regional boundaries are real and not going to be wiped out tomorrow. National and regional interests are real and are not going to be surrendered to monolithic global interests anytime soon. Thus, I think there is merit in and need for the Asian voice in communications. What started off 50 years ago in AMIC as an aspiration remains valid and vital today. In this time of celebration and reflection, and in this panel whose subject is AMIC at 50, what we have done and what we can still do, I would urge my friends and colleagues in the Asian media world to spare time and effort to revisit and rethink the fundamentals of Asian communications theory and practice. And now it is my pleasant duty to introduce the three speakers of this panel. Let me begin with Dr. Sadia Jamil. Dr. Sadia Jamil earned a PhD in journalism in University of Queensland, a Master of Science in Media Management from University of Scotland in Stirling, and an MA in Mass Communication from University of Karachi. She has taught courses at the Khalifa University of Science and Technology in Abu Dhabi, and in the past at the University of Queensland. She is currently doing research on artificial intelligence in news media industry, sustainability education, and sustainable development. Dr. Jamil is chair of the Journalism Research and Education section of the International Council of IAMCR. She sits in the editorial board of 6 international journals in the areas of journalism, digital media, political communication, and media practices in the Middle East. She is also serving as honorary advisor of Media Action Nepal. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Martin Hadlow. Dr. Hadlow's professional experience covers more than 45 years in international communication development, broadcasting, journalism, media management, academia, and training gained in over 50 countries, especially in Asia, the Middle East, and the Pacific. His background includes an extensive career with UNESCO, where he served as representative, director, and regional communication advisor of field offices in Malaysia, Kazakhstan, Jordan and Iraq, Afghanistan, and Sri Lanka. He also held senior positions at UNESCO headquarters in Paris, including as Global Director of the Division of Freedom of Expression, Democracy, and Peace. Later, he became an associate professor at the University of Queensland and foundation director of UQ's Center for Communication and Social Change. He holds a PhD from the University of Queensland, an MA in Mass Communication from Leicester University in UK, and was conferred an honorary doctorate by the Senate of the Kazakh State University in Kazakhstan. Now, above all of these, I would like to highlight his service with AMIC as a board director and as acting Secretary General in Singapore. This was the time I got to know Dr. Hadlow personally and realized what remarkable qualities he possessed and are not mentioned in his resume. Unlike me, he was a consummate diplomat and immensely patient and forgiving. He stood by principles and policies, but he conducted the affairs of AMIC with deft and delicate touches. I'm happy to admit I learned much from him. Finally, it is customary to say that such and such a person needs no introduction, and if that were ever true, it is truest in the case of the next panelist I'm going to introduce. No one who has been a long-term member of AMIC would not know Professor Crispin Maslow's. In fact, many more around the world know him and respect him deeply. He is one of the few living founder members of AMIC and is an institution by himself. To me and to many others, he has been a mentor, guide, and philosopher. To me and many others, he is an example of purposeful living and relentless pursuit of purpose. I am proud and honored to have worked with him, and it is truly wonderful to have him with us today as the current chairman of AMIC. And by the way, I'm wearing my Filipino shirt in his honor. Now, for those new members of AMIC and some attendees of this conference, let me read a few bits from his long resume. Professor Maslow, a journalism practitioner and academician, started out as a full-time journalist with the Agence France Presse before he went to the University of Minnesota on a Fulbright Smith-Mundt scholarship. After getting his PhD, he returned to the Philippines and became director of the School of Communication, Silliman University. He later became a professor, College of Development Communication, University of the Philippines, Las Banos. After retiring from UPLB in 1998, by the way, he has retired many times since then, he was invited to be Senior Vice President and Dean, Graduate School, Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication in Manila. After retirement, again, he has been a visiting professor in the United States, Norway, and Singapore. He has published 37 books, including topics in science writing, biotechnology, and climate change. And by the way, he's the chief editor of the AMIC 50th anniversary publication, A History of AMIC, which will be launched shortly, which you just heard about. So, having introduced the three panel speakers, now it is my great honor to invite the Professor Maslow to speak first before the other panelists. Chris, it's your turn now. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron, for that introduction. I was looking around me to see if you were referring to someone else. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I will just stick to it. Otherwise, I would speak probably for 2 hours. And Ramon will kick me out of this conference. So let's start with the topic assigned to me, science communication, managing the now and the future.
Recording in
Who founded the
progress.
organization. And AMIC was originally intended to be a clearinghouse for research and information on communication and communication education in Asia. Excuse me. So before I proceed, I would like to clarify. I pronounce AMIC with a short A, AMIC, and some people pronounce it AMIC. I would like to say that both pronunciations are correct. One is British, the other one is American, or one is American and the other one is Filipino. So what has AMIC done in the last 50 years? With funding from
Recording in
did,
progress.
And this year, we mark the 50th anniversary of this organization with our 28th annual international conference. So as the years flew by, AMIC grew from baby to toddler to millennial. The founding members, except for Thomas Lee of Taiwan and me, faded one by one into the dustbin of history, to borrow a classic phrase from Leon Trotsky. AMIC headquarters was moved from Singapore to Manila in 2015, and I became chair of the board of trustees, and Ramon became secretary general. It was at this juncture that I revived my long-time plan to write a history of AMIC. And despite the obstacles, this time I was able finally to assemble a team of experts to help me write. And so, a History of Asian Media Information Center will be soft launched on December 4, the closing day of the conference. The book summarizes what AMIC has done. So what I will say after this will be only a very uh, short gist of what the book will tell you, and that is my advertising that you should buy the book. So what has AMIC done? It has launched together with another book, the history, and the other book is one of the topics that Arun is very uh, happy about, communication theory, the Asian perspective, edited by Wimal Sanayake. So this landmark publication
Recording stopped.
are these landmark publications are significant achievements that I can tout as an achievement that we can be proud of as we celebrate our Golden Jubilee this year. Next. Recording has stopped. It says, can we continue or we just wait? Somebody. Okay, what AMIC has done to give you a bird's eye view in 10 minutes. What AMIC has accomplished in 50 years, I will just give you snapshots of history. Conferences, at least 28 international conferences on the average of one conference every 2 years. An equal number of national conferences and regional workshops on critical communication and social issues of the day. So at these conferences, we tackle burning issues. And just to give you an example, in 2013 in Indonesia, the topic was transformational communication and the new Asia. In 2015 in Dubai, the topic was communicating across cultures in the digital era. In 2017 in the Philippines, I think, rethinking communication in a resurgent Asia. And then in 2018 in India, disturbing the Asian millennials, some creative responses. And in Thailand in 2019, communication, technology, and new humanism. So you can see that they covered the whole range of very, very important issues involving communication and society. Next. So all these are found in my writing of AMIC history.
Ako pa rin po rehearsals.
AMIC's first mandate was documentation and dissemination. It was mandated by its chapter to be a documentation unit or clearinghouse that will serve the whole of Asia. Including radio, TV, newspapers, and other appropriate communication facilities. At that time, the computer was not invented yet, and there was no such thing as texting and digital media. Next. AMIC was also tasked to establish a specialized library on mass communication, including the pertinent sciences, and this was done in the Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. And next, AMIC was tasked to maintain contacts with institutions in Asia and abroad concerned with mass communication activities. Next. So the other task that sort of proactive, future-oriented, that AMIC was given the mandate to do, were to promote regional and international cooperation and exchange of information in this field. 2, to disseminate information and research findings. 3, to assist cooperating institutions in the development of mass media in Asia. Next. And I will just describe what was the general feeling among the original conference of AMIC in Seoul, which was reported in the documents afterwards, and which I was not able to attend because of martial law in the Philippines. At the Seoul conference, which sort of summarized what the AMIC traveling seminar observed, the following recommendations were made. There was almost complete unanimity among the participants in identifying priority problems of Asian mass communication teaching and research. Number 1, the need for Asian scholars to prepare textbooks that are relevant and useful to institutions throughout the region. And I think this is the reason for the massive publishing program of AMIC in the early years. Number 2, the urgency felt by the participants of improving the standards of teaching and research in mass communication schools and colleges in Asia. And then the need to look into possibilities of building a mechanism of accrediting of teaching institutions. I am afraid to say that this is one of the original mandates of AMIC that was seen as very important, but which we have not accomplished up to this time. And I think this deserves a discussion at the next AMIC conference. And then at the time, in 1972, the conference in Seoul saw the need for regional research on agreed upon methodology to facilitate cross-national comparisons and, yes, on communication. By this Asian Association of Communicators. This is different from AMIC because AMIC is institutional and it does things as an institution. This one is as Association of Communication Professionals on an individual basis or by schools. And we have not done that. And I would put that to the second half of the topic, which is what AMIC can do. And I think that's the last part of my slide. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you the past of AMIC in the last 50 years. Good day to all of you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I think the advent of new technologies will pose, I mean, they have already posed problems, but I also think they pose a lot of new opportunities that AMIC would have to think of in terms of what it can do in the next 50 years. Unfortunately, we don't have much of a Q&A, in which case I would have engaged you on a longer discussion. So now we have to go to Dr. Sadia Jamil, whom I've already introduced. So Dr. Jamil, it's your turn now. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun, and thank you, Professor Maslock, for a wonderful introduction about AMIC and why it is crucial for me, because AMIC is 50 years old, but I am an infant member of AMIC who has just joined the organization this year as the country representative of UAE, with a commitment that I would strive to expand the vision of AMIC and agenda of AMIC across GCC and Middle East. So having said that we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Asian Media Information and Communication Center, and I am still an infant to the organization. Your presentation was really enriching my insights into how it operates, what the organization has previously done, and what we can do in present for envisaging a bright future of AMIC as an organization. So can we move to the next slide? I'm sorry, I don't have that. All right. So as evident with the name, AMIC, it's something organization that focuses on media and communication issues, research, dialogue within Asia. But definitely it is not the case. AMIC itself, being an Asian organization, has its wing with global outreach. So primarily, the organization, as we all know, serves as a regional hub for Asian media and communication scholars, for knowledge exchange, for dialogue, and for mutual collaboration for research activities. But at the same time, it is something that has a global outreach. So with the primary focus of AMIC in South Asia and East Asia, what I believe we need to focus on is to expand AMIC activities in other parts of Asia, particularly North, West Asia, and Central Asia, that we still need to focus on. So thinking beyond Asia means that making AMIC truly global. At the moment, we do have AMIC members. We have AMIC board of directors who have a global outreach, who have been striving constantly to promote AMIC activities across the globe. But now, as an AMIC member, what we have an agenda is to think in the areas where we have not touched upon previously. As I said, to focus on Asian regions such as North Asia, West Asia, Central Asia, and moving beyond Asia, introducing AMIC activities in Africa and in the Middle East. In July 2021, I was honored to join AMIC as a country representative of UAE, and my initial commitment was to get AMIC closely connected with Emirati institutions for partnership of events, for collaborative research activities. But within 2 months' time, I really got a good and positive response for countries like Qatar and Oman and Egypt, that they were entrusted to tie up with AMIC for collaborative work. So I would say that initially when I have joined AMIC as a country representative of UAE, I emphasized to broaden that partnership across the Middle East with all those international organizations who are entrusted to be in partner with AMIC. So for our 2022 agenda is to have AMIC partnership with educational institutions back to UAE, and as well as other Middle Eastern institutions who are actively interested to take part with AMIC for its annual conference and workshops. Something that I love to talk about is AMIC has old roots. We have mentors, we have people who guided AMIC, like as we say, we have Lakshmana Rao. I just happened to read the history of AMIC 1 week before the conference, and it was such enlightening how Lakshmana Rao and Professor Maslock initiated that journey. And as Arun enlightened us about how they have been engaged with focusing on different thematic areas across the 5 decades of AMIC. But what I found is an organization which has old roots, but we believe in research and innovation. We are now focusing on new contemporary issues that requires deeper investigation at our part. So here I list some of the thematic areas that I propose AMIC to take into consideration for its future event, maybe starting in 2022. The first thematic area that I emphasize is to talk about communication for sustainability. Recalling AMIC journey with thematic areas of communication and development, I emphasize that we need to rethink about communication for sustainable development that aligns with United Nations agenda of having sustainable futures. So communication for sustainable development or exclusively sustainability help us to focus on issues of change, environmental issues, and more broadly, how we can create an environment which is based on justice, equality for our future generations. So this is one of the thematic areas that I have been currently working on, and I will have this publication hopefully in spring 2022 that talks about how to communicate for sustainability in a broader Asian perspective. The second part is the role of artificial intelligence and technology in reshaping communication and media sector. Now, this is one of the thematic areas I have been inspired because I did research into artificial intelligence in Pakistani news media industry, which is now being expanded in Greek newsroom and in Latin American newsroom. So what is my emphasis is to expand the role of AI in reshaping communication and media sector in South Asian countries in comparison to other regions of the world, including Middle East, Latin America, and even Africa. So this is what we have been doing for the past 2 years. And I'm very delighted to share that this is one of the prospect thematic areas that AMIC can focus on in 2022. So we can bring very innovative research papers for the next AMIC conference. Another pressing issue is about environmental justice. We all keep on talking about environmental issues, how it is impacting our lives, but we sometimes not talk about whether people of marginalized communities are having environmental justice, particularly when we look at countries like South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and in Latin American countries, where people of marginalized communities are prone to issues of environmental injustice. We need to address that. We need to make sure that a clean and sustainable environment is available to all, regardless of their community differences and regardless of who is dominant or who is marginalized within any society. Now, having said that, another very pressing issue, we are now living in a world which is distinguished by differences. That could be differences based on culture, religion, ethnicity, and we all struggle to maintain our cultural identities in a new globalized era. So what we emphasize is to encourage our researchers and our workshop trainers to address the issue of cultural identities and disidentities in the new era of new globalization that needs to be unpacked. We need to facilitate debate into how we struggle to maintain our cultural identities in the world, which is marked by differences. Another important issue that we have picked from the thematic area of International Association of Media and Communication Research, media ethics in the digital age, which is one of the emphasized thematic area by IAMCR conference in 2022. So I humbly borrowed this from the IAMCR agenda because we can invite scholars for the next AMIC conference to contribute how ethics has been reshaping when we are living in a digital world. And that does involve ethics of different digital platforms, including new media, social media, and digital journalism. And finally, it is important to talk about data and digital science and how it operates in intercultural communication. So here we talk about the issues of privacy and open data sources. So this is something that Asian scholars can pay attention and contribute their role. All right, so if I have to describe the future of AMIC in one word, let me say that humbly, it is youth. I am testimony of it. I was humbly invited by AMIC to join as a country representative. Having said that, I say that we at AMIC are emphasizing encouraging young media professionals to come forward to take benefit from the guidance and mentoring of AMIC board of directors, AMIC founders, AMIC leaders who can guide us to reshape the future of Asian communication and media research. We have, as Bislov said, that he is a surviving leader of AMIC. We have you, we have Raymond, we have leaders like Arun, we have leaders like Madlo to learn and to follow the footprints, how they have maintained the legacy of AMIC as an organization and what we as youth can bring forward for a bright future of AMIC. Now, in this regard, I would like to highlight how AMIC is encouraging young leaders within the profession. Now, very recently, AMIC has announced the Young Leader Award that recognizes the potential of young media scholars and professionals. And for that purpose, we encourage all people who are interested to take part, please put forward your research papers and nominations for AMIC Young Leaders Award. AMIC is all set to recognize the achievements and potential of their young leaders. All right, so AMIC Vision at the 50. May I take this opportunity to say humbly, because still I'm a baby to AMIC, but if two lines I have to say, it's the power of knowledge and the potential of youth. That is the true weapon of AMIC. This is how
Yes, we already had this vision. And in fact, AMIC's definition of Asia extends from Turkey to Tasmania. And I'm going to ask the next speaker, my good friend, Dr. Hadlow, to tell you a little bit more about the original regional concept. Absolutely right. We have focused sometimes on too much on certain aspects of so-called Asian region to the neglect of others. So thank you for reminding us, Sadia. And now,
thank you, Arun.
Thank you. And now, Martin, it's your turn, and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Arun. And thank you for your most gracious words a few moments ago about our time together. For those who are not familiar with the situation, I was the acting Secretary General in Singapore at the end of the time that AMIC spent in Singapore, 2013, 2014, and it was a very difficult period. Can you hear me now?
Okay,
Yes,
yeah. Now,
I was cut off. I'm glad that we are back online. Suddenly it says the host ended the meeting. I hope everybody is back online.
I'm back. I think it was
Okay,
a technical
yeah.
glitch or something.
Yes, okay. Martin, I'm sorry, you may
No
have to start again. Perhaps not to thank me, but talk about the last year of AMIC in Singapore. That's where I think we were cut off. Yeah.
I think so. I'll keep. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
good, very good, very good. Look, I'll keep my presentation short because I know that we're going on to parallel sessions very soon. From the outset, can I say that, of course, I agree fully with everything that Professor Chris Maslog has said, and also the words of Dr. Jamil, who I thought came up with some very, very cogent and good ideas for the future of the organization. We've heard a lot about science today, so I'm going to keep a little bit away from that conversation. It's been a very rich discussion. Professor Chomsky I found quite disconcerting and worrying. I think I'm going to have to get a copy of his book to look into it, to read further about it. I'm going a little bit off topic. As I say, I thought I would take a more personal view of AMIC, and I asked the question, if it didn't exist, we'd have to invent it, would we? I mean, that's a saying, isn't it? If it didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. You hear that said often about organizations like the United Nations or the European Union or whatever it happens to be. So how about AMIC? If it wasn't established back in 1971, would we need to invent such an organization now? But I will come back to that question later and also give an answer, or my personal answer anyway. However, I thought the best way I could explain and start to talk about AMIC would be through explaining my own experiences with the organization. As Chris has said, he's editing a major publication on the history of AMIC, so I won't talk about that too much. And if you'd like to know more about the 2013-14 period, there's a whole chapter on that in his publication. It's definitely going to be worth buying, I think. Let me talk about my own membership when I joined, because it may resonate with you, and particularly with some of the younger audience today. I became a financial member of AMIC back in 1983. It's just under 40 years ago. At the time, I wasn't an academic, and like Aaron, I was a media professional. In fact, I was advisor and trainer to the Solomon Islands Broadcasting Corporation, living in Solomon Islands, which is a very small country far out in the Pacific. And this was the days long before the internet, so communication was, of course, rather difficult to say the least. I'm not sure how I first heard of AMIC. I've been trying to think about that. Still, once I received by snail mail, which took weeks to get there from Singapore, of course, I received a copy of the Asian Media Communication Bulletin, as it was called, and then Media Asia, which was a prestige publication, both printed on paper, of course, no online in those days. But once I read it, I was keen to know more, because here before my eyes, a new world was opening up to me, a world in which Asian communication scholars and media professionals were forging a new identity and a new way of looking at the whole communication scene. I mean, Aaron and Chris and Dr. Jamil have also mentioned this in their presentations. The words I read in those publications were not just the old style material from eminent, mostly American scholars in those days, but from researchers and writers in Asia who look for new ways of approaching local problems and situations. And all of this was something of a revelation to me. And I drew on their inspiration to better inform my own work, especially in the development, in the production of development programs for village people, which we broadcast on the radio station in Solomon Islands. So I wanted to know, how did the programs impact on local communities? How were the messages received? Were we broadcasting in an appropriate way to reach the audience of people often living in very remote islands far from any facilities? And many of these communication issues were being canvassed in the publications produced by AMIC. and were hugely influential in shaping my thinking and, in fact, in my daily work. At the time, internationally, there were very few communication scholars from the Pacific itself, from the vast Pacific Ocean, the small island nations, with the main base for the subject being at the East-West Center of the University of Hawaii. The director of the center was the famous Professor John Lent. I'm sure we've all read his books, the late John Lent, and some students from Pacific nations were in residence and they were learning. However, these were very early days for studies of the subject, and it was at least another decade before basically a number of Pacific Islanders themselves began to make an impact in the field and to espouse their own thoughts on making communication work to the advantage of their own countrymen and women. A few years after my Solomon Island sojourn, I took up a role in Southeast Asia with an ASEAN project based in Kuala Lumpur. And at the time, AMIC was still its original home in Singapore. And it was very good to meet the then Secretary General, Vijay Menon, and his team, included Dr. Anura, of course, when they passed through KL. So let me come back to my original query. If AMIC did not exist, would it have to be invented today? And the answer for me is an unequivocal yes, for many reasons. Now, one relates to the fact that AMIC remains the key regional institution involved in enunciating communication issues specific to the Asia Pacific. Certainly, it's true scholars can join other global entities, which many of us have done, such as ICA, IMCR, and so forth, but the only locally based institution with a regional focus in this field is AMIC. And this is important. If we lose AMIC as a focal point, who will publish and carry out all the other activities for which AMIC is renowned? And what are those activities? Well, we heard about them: documentation program, research programs, publishing programs, training programs, thousands of books that have been published by AMIC. And these are world leaders in the field. Of course, there are the conferences such as this one online, where both students and experienced researchers can present their latest papers. In particular, I've always thought of AMIC conferences as being friendly places, friendly spaces where young researchers often present for the first time. And that's a very special thing for AMIC too, and for them as well, of course. But AMIC has one very specific aspect which makes it stand out from the others, and that is the network of country representatives, and most importantly, local branches. And in the past, members could pay their subscriptions or purchase publications using local currency through those branches. It was good to hear that Dr. Jamil is the new country representative for the UAE. In times past, it was vital to have these country branches, and many countries didn't allow money to be sent abroad. There were exchange rules and regulations, or if they did, it was with great difficulty. That's a local AMIC branch could gather the funds and they could be forwarded once a year, theoretically, to Singapore. It often didn't work that way, but it doesn't sound like a vitally important role for AMIC to take, but it really does make a difference on the ground. The title of this plenary session is What We Have Done, What We Can Still Do. And of course, it's easy for me to say that AMIC must continue to exist and operate. After all, I'm both a life member, a former board director, and a former secretary general. So I would say that, wouldn't I? I would say yes. Because even, I would still say, because even in this new digital age, the fundamentals which make AMIC the institution that it is still exist. University scholars and students still look to publish their books or articles in journals, whether print or online. And AMIC publishes two of the best, the Asian Journal of Communication and Media Asia. And of course, there are opportunities to be a chapter author in publications such as the award-winning Asian Communication Handbook. One huge matter distinguishes the present AMIC from the former AMIC, and that is the digital revolution. And as Dr. Jamil called it, old roots, new focus. And I think that's very true. We live in a 24/7 world. that's brought the breakup of society as we once knew it. The familiar past of working from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or whatever is gone. And now we receive and answer texts and emails all hours of the day and night, and weekends and days off and so forth. And the media has changed too so much. Once we purchased a daily newspaper and could tell the importance of the stories by the way in which they were placed on the front page. Now, digital news sites change every few minutes, and it's impossible for the reader to tell which item is considered really important and which is entertainment or opinion or comment. And this is where AMIC continues to have a role. In a global community of constant change, AMIC can provide its members with not only a solid base of networking to continue the traditional research and publication space so necessary for academic excellence, but also to be able to make sense of the new digital world and to share that knowledge with both the AMIC membership and the broader citizens of the community, to be at the cutting edge, as it were. So almost to conclude, one issue does, however, arise in all of this, and that's the willingness of people to pay a membership fee to join a body such as AMIC. It's not a huge amount of money, but it is considerable.
The old roots, but I think the new branches rather than new focus will be represented by people like Sadia. And I think they come with the kind of passion, not just of the young, but also of the newly informed. Their understanding of media is definitely very different from ours. And that is the media, that is the scenario that we all have to live with now. Now, I want to just remind ourselves of what Prof. Chomsky said. I've been a long time admirer of his. I've read most of his work. And to some people, he sounds alarmist, but to me, he has always been prescient. And I think the precipice is precisely what I feel too, that we are at this, at a crucial moment. If we don't do enough now, it may be far too late. So just as in climate change, just as in pandemics and endemics, we must have the political will as well as the organizational skill to get the job done. So the future of AMIC, there's a long way. I mean, Martin, you said we have come a long way, but we also have a very long way to go. And I'm glad people like Sadia have come on board. So on that note, I want to thank all three of you for your brilliant, enthusiastic, and energizing presentations. And now I would like to hand it back to our great Mistress of Ceremony, Chichi.